This conference will now be recorded.
All right, folks. So again, good morning and thank you for attending class today. I'm glad you're here. And we're going to be reviewing and going over the remaining portion of this chapter as far as chapter 28, and then moving on and finishing up as far as over the next couple of weeks here. We'll be looking at finishing up plants and looking at those and having our test for that. And we'll discuss more about that in next week there. But at present here, I want to go over and look at this, just review this as far as the plant life cycle, and so important as far as for last week there when we looked at the seed plants, and now we're looking at seedless plants. Kind of did a little bit backwards, but what I want to show you is that the seed plants are what we're very familiar with. The seedless plants, maybe not so much. You kind of just walk past when you're doing a hike and such. And yesterday we were going hiking and we saw a lot of these seedless plants on the ground as far as on the trails and such, as well as developing seed plants that we start to see some leaves present and such. Really, I love being out in nature, and I hope you do too. And it's so healthy for us to get out there in the sun a little bit and enjoy what's around us in this world that we live in, which is quite remarkable. You'll see here that as far as the plant life cycle is concerned, so I'm just going to move for a moment here, just to the next slide, and we'll come back. But this is something that you should commit to memory. You should know this. This is an important aspect of, I'm not going to ask you to commit to memory all of the different life cycles of the fern and of all the, I'm not going to ask that of you, but I'm going to ask you to know certain terms and such and terminology that I will ask of you, okay? And this basic alternation of generations, realizing that these plants, whether they are seedless or whether they are seed plants, and whether they're more basic plants as far as the seedless plants are concerned to more complex plants and having additional structures as far as those complex plants are concerned, realizing that there are these diploid and haploid phases. These are these areas where we're going to have sporophytes and gametophytes, and we're going to be looking at these different terms and reviewing them again and seeing that as far as the life cycles of these seedless plants that we're going to be looking at, and realizing what's taking place and what they represent and how we come about this. So this, I would absolutely ask of you all to commit this slide to memory as far as being able to draw it out and to practice drawing it out so that you have a basic understanding of what's taking place no matter what plant we're talking about, okay? This is very important, and you should have a good working understanding of this. And knowing that, and we're going to go back to the slide here and seeing that as far as whether we're looking at basic plants or we're looking at more complex plants, we're going to see that as far as this alternation of generations, the basic pattern for the plant life cycle, and that's why I'm asking you to memorize it, whether we're looking at the more simple plants and seeing that they're going to have one aspect of this be more dominant than the other. So in the case of the simple plants, the gametophyte stage will be more dominant in comparison to more complex plants. So say the sporophyte phase will be more important to them and will be more dominant, okay? So think about this as far as with the simple plants, like say when we look at the moss and such, the gametophyte is going to be a larger organism in comparison to the sporophyte, okay? And where that's going to be opposite as far as, so say seed plants, like a tree, the actual tree that you're looking at, not the root structure, but the actual tree, the plant, the leaves and such, the sporophyte, that's the sporophyte, and that's can be very large, right? So I want you to see that this is what's going on as far as understanding the basic life cycle and being able to take it and look at it from either the simple plants to the more complex plants. Okay, that's important there, and realizing also that that both are multicellular organisms. Okay, much different from when we're looking at animals. Really, what's going on with the gametes for animals, right? They are our gametes are being produced are the sperm and the egg, and they are simple, small, tiny cells, right? In comparison to the human organism itself, right? Or other types of creatures and such that are not live there. Let's see here. Let's go. So I want you to see this as far as this is important for you to commit to memory, to review that and go over that. In the lab, you're going to be doing some work as far as drawing and just reviewing some information and such. And so you'll see that over the next week and a half or so. So I'm going to make the lab due not just 1 week, but next Saturday. Okay. So I'm going to try and do that from now on till the end of the semester. Give you like like a week and a few days, week and a half to get your labs submitted and done. Okay. I think that might be a little bit less stressful for you all, and any way I can help, I'd like to do that. You'll see here as far as the phylogeny is concerned, and it'll break down as far as the different types of whether we're looking at non-vascular or vascular plants and that are seedless, and then seed plants and such. So just you can take a look at that and review that and look at what we see as far as the common organisms and such, common ancestry for these different taxa. Now, as we look at the non-vascular and then vascular plants as far as the seedless variety are concerned, we're going to be looking at these bryophytes. Okay, so this is just a term that we use to describe the liverworts, the hornworts, the mosses and such. And during the lab over the next week and a half, I'd like you to be able to get outside a little bit and take some pictures of some mosses and such that you might see in your area. And see if you can look at even like some different types and varieties of, that would be great. Okay, so you're going to see here also that in comparison from these non-vascular to the vascular plants, the necessity and really understand that these simple plants really, they need a lot of moisture, they need water in order to have fertilization taking place. Okay, so they definitely need water, and they definitely need to be around moist environments and such. Realize that it's going to be a different type of a situation regarding having non-vascular, no vessels present in order to move the water. So then are these plants going to be very kind of like low to the ground? They're not going to be growing very tall, right? Because they need vessels in order to move. Recall we mentioned about the xylem and the phloem, right? So the xylem is going to be moving water and minerals and nutrients from any type of root structure, right, to the plant. And so that's important, as well as the phloem moving as a result of photosynthesis, movement of carbohydrates and food to the remaining portion of the plant. So really we're going to be going from like down, inferior to superior, right? As far as the xylem is concerned, moving of the water and the minerals and nutrients from the root structure into the plant, as far as vascular is concerned, and then phloem for the movement of the food, movement of the what's produced as a result of photosynthesis, from superior to inferior to really going downward into the plant and such, and that's for vascular. So non-vascular, we don't have those structures present, right? So they need to live in these moist environments. And look at this here. I like that. This is really a cool term, epiphytes. So epiphytes. So you're thinking of plants that are actually living upon other plants. They're growing on other plants. It's non-parasitic, meaning, right, that they're not just, it's not a one-way environment where we're just pulling from, taking from, right? It's not that kind of a situation at all. They live upon this. They're not causing any harm, okay? And these mosses are, you'll see them all throughout, as well as we looked at fungi and such, and saw what was going on as far as that's concerned with living on other plant life and such. Flagellated sperm. So again, I said to you that there needs to be water, right? So there's not these bryophytes do not have vascularity, right? They don't have the xylem. So they need to be in water in order to allow for the sperm to fertilize the egg, right? So the sperm needs to be in a moist environment that can travel through the water to the egg. No true roots or these lignified cells. These are very important cells that we'll see a little bit later regarding giving structure to a plant and such, right? The cuticle and the stomata are present for these types of cells, and meaning that the cuticle is this waxy coating, right, that'll be protective and allow for conservation of water, and stomata on the underside of these plants in order to allow for openings. Remember the guard cells that are surrounding the stoma, these openings, this mouth, type structure, this opening that'll allow for CO2 to enter in, and it'll allow for water, and it'll allow for oxygen to exit. Okay, so they do have those. You'll see here as far as their Gametophyte Dominant. Okay, and the Gametophyte really is going to be the larger of the structure in comparison to the Sporophyte as far as these bryophytes are concerned. And they're not very large plants. Now they can spread over very vast areas of wherever they're growing, but know that they're not in and of themselves as far as a single plant. They're small plants and they're not growing very high. Okay. And you'll see here as far as the Archegonia, you're thinking of for the female, you're thinking of the egg, you're thinking of Antheridia, Antheridium, you're thinking of the for the sperm and such, okay? And when we're looking at as far as IA and IUM, right? So we're looking at as far as singular for IUM, and we're looking at plural for IA, okay, as far as the suffix is concerned for words. So I'll say that again. So when we see the IA, we're thinking of plural as far as a suffix is concerned. And we're thinking of IUM suffix, we're looking at singular, okay? So here we have representations of these seedless plants as far as moss. And again, too, like I said, doesn't grow very high, but wow, look at how it can spread throughout in quite a vast area. The ferns, and you know, these are very, we're all familiar with these. I would say we've all seen them, but maybe like the liverworts, you didn't really know or understand as far as what they might be called, or you might have known that. But I mean, a fern, we all know what a fern looks like. We all know what moss looks like. The horsetail, they're very unique in their structure, right? And absolutely, and look at these liverworts. They're pretty interesting and cool in that they have, they kind of have the appearance of a lobe type appearance, and that's hence why they use that common term, that liverwort, because they have this liver, animal type liver has multiple lobes and such, and so that's how they come about with that strange term for liverwort. Okay, and this was just taken from the beginning of the PowerPoint, and I brought it back into here again just to show you and remind you as far as what they look like. Okay, and so as we're looking at these the bryophytes here, right, and just in general, okay, you're seeing here as far as, look at the antheridium would be for the male and production of the sperm portion, and the egg cell produced by the archegonium. Okay, and you'll see here also that, and quite interesting also, right, that you see here as far as the rhizoids are concerned. So they're root-like, but they're not true roots. Okay, so rhizoids, they're root-like, but they're not true roots, but they will anchor the plant as well as provide water and nutrients from the ground. But they're still, as far as their structure is concerned, structurally, they wouldn't be considered roots, but they're root-like. Okay, and you'll see here also as far as the gametophyte in comparison to the sporophyte. Okay. All right, so liverworts, right? So possibly the first land plants, and so that's an important thing to take away from knowing that there. You'll see here as far as gametophyte generation consists of a flat branching ribbon-like plate of tissue called the thallus. So as you're looking at the liverwort there, that's what you're looking at, the thallus. It has rhizoids, again, too, they anchor to the substrate. So whatever that may be that this plant is on, whether it's on the ground, whether it's on a log, whether it's on whatever it may be, that's what we're talking about, substrate there. And no stomata, interesting, right? So a little bit, there's a little bit of variations and differences between these different types. And you'll see here as far as the marcantia would be the one that would be representative of the liverworts. You'll see here, this is quite interesting. So they have this male and female, so the sexual reproduction as well as asexual reproduction. And in the lab there, you're going to be noting and defining these terms as far as the gemme or the gemma, multicellular vegetative body or bodies, right? And develop in tiny cups on the plant body. The gemme can grow into new plants when splashing raindrops transports them to suitable sites. How wild is that, right? That's crazy. So, you know, we have these through asexual reproduction, these gemmae are present within, again, within these vegetative bodies. These are the gemmae, and then they'll in these cups, raindrops will fall and then allow for them to spread out and to go and to have the opportunity to grow and to, so you'll see here, cool, right? So here's the thallus. Again, no stomata. You'll see here that the cup and the gemme, which are present within, okay? Which then they can leave, and you'll see here how we have growth throughout this whole little area that we're viewing as far as the liverworts spreading out and growing. Okay, and here again, just another, isn't it? Yeah, Brian, I agree, right? It really is. It's pretty neat, pretty cool, pretty interesting. And honestly, you know, had you not like heard about this or read this, you'd be like, what? You know, like you just look at it and go, oh, that's interesting. But realizing that through the act of just raindrops falling on these cups and allowing for the gemme to reach out into the ground and such, they can in turn allow for new plant life to grow. And again, this is the gametophyte. Oh, excuse me one moment. I'm too funny. It sounds like hold on, one smoke alarm. Too funny. My daughter's making bacon for BLTs and it kind of triggered the smoke alarm there. All right, folks. So liverworts, very interesting. Yeah, good stuff. Now we're looking at mosses. Again, part of the these very simple type plants. Okay, so and really, I like how this is described as far as these carpets of vegetation, right? So true. I mean, just look at that image that we saw here earlier there, right? Really, it is this carpet of vegetation and such. And they can be really very interesting to look at. And like I said, I'd like you all as part of the lab assignment coming up, and again, not due for, you know, until, let's see. So this new lab assignment will be due on the 24th. Okay, so that'll be, you know, a week and a couple days, and a Saturday. And so what I'd like you to do is get a chance to go out and get out into nature, and even just in your own backyard, wherever it may be, and see if you can take a picture, a couple pictures of some different types of moss present in your environment. All right, that would be cool. So you see here that they do have the stomata, right? So they do have the guard cells surrounding this little opening, which allows for, again, CO2 to enter in, oxygen to leave, as well as water can leave, okay? And again, these small plants are really living in a very, so let's do 36. So these bryophytes, they are living in a very moist environment. That's what they need to be, in a very moist environment. And again, important for their fertilization to occur. Okay, so let's see here as far as, so again, these are all non-vascular. So there are these, you'll see here as far as some have a central strand of primitive conducting tissue, but it's really not the same as like the xylem and the phloem, okay? And let's see here, as far as they can also reproduce asexually by gemmas, as well as the liverworts, okay? And so you're seeing here as far as the gametophyte, and so again, these are all gametophyte dominant, meaning that these are the larger of the structures and such, and will really help to support the sporophyte and provide nutrition for the sporophyte, okay? Here's the rhizoid, right? Acts as a anchor as well as providing nutrition for the moss. And I just like how they look, right? Aren't they just really, really interesting looking? This hair cap moss, and it's really pretty. And if have you seen it like out in the wild and seen how it really creates this pretty carpet of this type of moss? I just think it's really, really pretty cool. So here we're looking at, okay, as far as an example of this polytrichum, right? Polytrichum, right? And you'll see here as far as the haploid and diploid generations. And what you're seeing here is that look at this, how large, and even though it's relatively small as far as the environment is concerned, still like it's gametophyte dominant. And this is really what's going to be present. And look at here, folks, even after fertilization of the egg and sperm, okay, and going from the haploid generation. So all of these cells, so this is a multicellular organism in which all of these cells are haploid, right? Contain half the chromosomes, okay? Now we get over here to the diploid generation. So we still have this haploid gametophyte, which will allow for and provide nutrients to the sporophyte, okay? So it provides nutrients for the sporophyte. And so this would be, again, sorry, right here would be haploid, but this would be diploid. So this would have a full complement of the cells as far as of the chromosomes, and realizing that, then we end up having this sporophyte. So we're looking at the fern here, example of fern. These are little fiddleheads and such. And then you'll see as far as, and look at the underside of the leaves that you're seeing present here, right? You're seeing that we have these structures that are going to produce, right, cluster of spore producing structures on the underside of the fern. And then meiosis will take place, and then we'll go from, and it's a reduction type of division here. And this reduction type of division will produce the haploid cells, okay, and produce the gametophyte. Hornworts, okay, so hornworts, they have a very unique appearance and look kind of like a horn, okay, and you'll see here that possibly they were considered the first land plants. Stomata, now stomata here, as far as permanently open, they're not opening and closing depending upon what's going on as far as the environment that they're living in, okay. They also have sexual and asexual reproduction. And look at here, each cell has a single large chloroplast that contains algal-like protein bodies called pyrenoids. And so this is involved in photosynthesis, okay? And so kind of like, think about it for a moment, then they kind of look like horns. It's kind of interesting, right? And you'll see here are these supportive gametophytes. As far as the gametophyte, again, when you're looking at it here, it would be the haploid generation, and the diploid would be the sporophyte. Okay, just giving you another one as far as looking at the horns and seeing as far as the how the gametophyte is supporting and providing nutrition for the sporophyte. So seedless vascular plants. So we looked at the non-vascular, right? And now we're going to look at the vascular and realize that this will allow for this vegetation to grow in size and such. Now look at this here. Seedless vascular plants were the dominant plants on the earth for almost 200 million years in these different periods and such. And so realize that quite a long period of time as far as evolutionary theory is concerned, these seedless vascular plants were very important, okay? Like the bryophytes, they reproduce sexually by spores, okay? Have swimming sperm, okay, so they require water. So water is necessary, so they need to be, the necessity to be in a very damp, moist environment is important as far as reproduction is concerned and fertilization. Now you're going to see here, so now this is seedless, right? So we had seedless avascular, non-vascular, and they had what? The gametophytes were the more dominant generation. Now we get to seedless vascular, and we're going to have the sporophyte is the larger, longer-lived stage of the life cycle. Okay, so this is important for you, please, to kind of just, as far as knowing the differences between the different types of seedless non-vascular and seedless vascular. That's an important difference. Okay, and really like questions, like I would ask questions along those lines. Okay, so again, I wouldn't ask. So I'm not going to ask specific questions regarding what's taking place at each stage, although knowing that, right, knowing what's taking place as far as chromosome numbers and what type of structures are present throughout, that would be important as far as the general life cycle and such, and questions as far as testing is concerned, okay? So you'll see here as far as this table just gives you some nice little, in one little page here and table regarding what's going on as far as all the different types of common names that we have, as far as liverworts, the mosses, the hornworts, club mosses we haven't talked about, and the fern we looked at just only a moment ago. So you'll see here as far as non-vascular, vascular. And so this is a nice page also just to remember as far as, so water is required for both the bryophytes and Lycophyta, the different types of vascular and non-vascular. And you're going to see that water is required for both because, again, it's required for fertilization to take place. You'll see that cuticle, again, that waxy surface of the plant, as well as the stomata, those holes, those openings, present in some for the bryophytes, non-vascular, and the vascular present in all. Okay, that's also important to know. So the Lycophytes, right? Small, low species. Okay, so similar as far as the non-vascular, as far as the mosses and such, as not very large in size. You'll see here small leaves. Sporophylls, right? Near the tips of the stems, each have a sporangium, and the clusters of the sporophylls form the conical strobilus. So very unique in structure. You're going to see that in here as far as seeing the club moss and such that they're talking about, quillwort, spike moss, very unique in their presentation, pretty sharp looking, and knowing that they are vascular. Okay. You'll see here as far as the gametophyte becomes buried under decomposing plant litter, right? So in the what's going on as far as how it's the foundation and what's really the rhizoids are pulling moisture and nutrients from. Again, not true root system, rhizoids, but the rhizoids also know this as far as into this substrate, this decomposing plant litter and such. They have this relationship with, and we would say this mutualistic relationship with fungi. Okay, so that the mycorrhizae, right, these fungi are enabling these plants, and you'll see there as far as we saw last week there as far as for the seed type plants, as far as the angiosperm and the gymnosperms, what's going on with their roots. They also have this relationship with the mycorrhizae and are able to expand their ability to take nutrients and moisture and such. And so it's a very important relationship, okay? The gametophytes produce the gametes, the sperm and the egg, and we get that, right? And we know that, again, they need this water environment to be in so that fertilization can take place, the sperm can travel in the water. And so this is what I wanted to show you, is just so we skip here, but seeing here as far as the strobilus, this cone-shaped structure. Pretty cool looking, right? Pretty interesting. Ferns. Ferns you've seen a lot over, I'm sure, as far as on your travels and hikes and such, and recognize very much as far as very unique in their presentation and their appearance and such. And you'll see here that as far as the leaves are really the fronds is a proper term. And I didn't say that before, sorry, when we were looking at the image there, but the fronds, these fern leaves, multiple strands of vascular tissue. Again, these are vascular types of plants. Okay, the frond has a well-developed epidermis with chloroplasts. Again, involved in, and we're going to be talking more about this as far as photosynthesis is concerned. And then the stomata on the lower surfaces and such, right? So those stomata, those openings there, very important as far as again, we're taking in CO2, we're allowing to leave oxygen, as well as water will exit from those stomata. The young fronds emerge above the soil as fiddleheads, right? And I pointed that out to you before there. And the stems of most ferns are underground rhizomes. Okay, so again, so realizing that, knowing it's a very important as far as the structure that's being supportive, and then allowing for then the plant, the sporophyte to really develop from. Let's see here, and the nodes are really where those fronds, those leaves are developing along the rhizome. You'll see here as far as sporophyte produces the sporangia, which is, again, this common pattern of what's taking place as far as, what's taking place as far as this alternation of generations and such. Let's see here. This is cool. As the sporangium slowly dries, the annulus contracts, the sporangium snaps open and flings out the mature spores. How wild is that, right? That this can take place as far as the structures of the fern is concerned, and allowing for then a germinating spore. Spore will develop into a gametophyte, typically a small heart-shaped plant anchored to the soil by rhizoids, and then again, small gametophyte. It's the sporophyte that is dominant as far as these vascular plants are concerned, in opposition to what we were looking at before as far as the avascular plants. Right? So you're seeing here as far as basic structure and such. Okay. And again, too, another image is showing you as far as the basic structure of, and looking at the underside of the frond of the leaves. Here we're looking at again, and we just showed, this was earlier on in the PowerPoint that we were looking at today, and just seeing how as far as the difference between the gametophyte and the sporophytes of the alternation of generations of the fern. So now, some terms here that you need to know as far as antheridia, archegonia, right? As far as production of the sperm and the egg, and present again on the lower surface of each of the gametophytes, okay? And again, these are sporophyte dominant, okay? Flagellated sperm, so we need moisture, we need water present in order for fertilization to occur. After fertilization, this zygote, right, because that's what it is, it has a full complement, it's diploid, the zygote develops into an embryo, okay, which will in turn obtain its nutrients from the gametophyte, right? So this is very interesting how that gametophyte is going to provide the nutrients and then eventually disintegrate, degenerate, disintegrate, and we'll be left with then the sporophyte. So the sporophyte becomes nutritionally independent, then that gametophyte will degenerate and die. Another type of vascular plant, the whisk ferns, okay? You'll see here that they're epiphytes. So what are they doing? They're growing on another plant, not parasitic, so more of a mutualistic type of situation here, and resemble the Cooksonia, okay? So let's look here as far as when we, coming back to 56, let me just notate that there. As far as slides 15 through 17 in the presentation. Oh, there we go. Okay. And so you're seeing here, as far as here's an example of the Cooksonia and such, and you're seeing very unique in its presentation as far as this fossilized plant is concerned. And so Cooksonia, which dates to about 420 million years ago, right? Cooksonia stems lacked leaves and were probably less than 3 centimeters long. The cup-shaped structures at the top of the stems produce the reproductive spores. And you'll see here, as far as the earliest fossils of a vascular plant would be the Cooksonia, okay? Naked stems, forked branches, they have those sporangia containing the capsules containing the spores, and on that little cup-shaped apparatus there, structure. And okay, good. Okay, so let's see here. All right, yeah, so the stem has photosynthetic epidermal cells, and the core of really the xylem and the phloem, again, the xylem moving water from the rhizoids and such, and bringing up to the plant structure and moving that water, the minerals and such, and the phloem moving what's being produced as a result of photosynthesis. Okay. Again, lack roots and leaves. There's the stem and these scales, horizontal rhizomes. Again, too, realizing that there's a relationship with the fungi as far as allowing for an expansion of the ability to take moisture and minerals from the soil and from the substrate. And let's see here. Yeah, so here we're looking at a whisk fern, which is very different from when you're thinking of a fern. You're not thinking of this type of a structure for the plant, right? Very unique in its presentation. Horsetails, Okay, horsetails, growing in moist soil along streams. Again, too, these are vascular, right? They'll have whorls of scale-like leaves arranged around a photosynthetic stem embedded with silica. You'll see here, as far as, look at that unique presentation, right? So again, very, very unique in its presentation of these horsetails, and kind of looking like a little bit of a interesting structure there. So let's see here, as far as the haploid spores. Now listen, this is quite interesting as far as dispersed via air, okay, in comparison to being present within moisture and such, and allowing for that to take place. A little bit of a different type of situation here. So the spores, the male portion of the alternation of generations will then be transported via the spores and dispersed, and then have the opportunity then to germinate in another area that can be appropriate for the growth of the horsetail. Okay. And then again, the strobilus is an aggregation of the sporangia at the tip of the horsetail, the sporophyte, right? So here's the sporophyte. Each petal-shaped sporangium of a strobilus contains spores that formed via meiosis. Okay? And again, meiotic division would be that, again, we're having that division where we're taking place, we're producing as a result of division. It's taking then the full complement of chromosomes to only one half of a set, or one set of chromosomes, okay? Not a full set. Let's see here, ecological, economic, and research importance of seedless plants, okay? So they said as far as first colonizers of bare land. Now think about this for a moment, right? So you have this bare land, and what's going to prevent erosion and such, right? So what happens is that these bryophytes, when they do, they trap particles of organic and inorganic matter, help to build the soil on bare rock and stabilizing soil surfaces with a biological crust in harsh places and such. And so, and recall, just like look at what we saw earlier there today, as far as this image of the mosses, and look at the environment where you saw that image. Look at this here, right? So does that look like a little bit of maybe of a hostile environment as far as growth of vegetation and such? And yet the moss is able to grow in this very hostile environment. You'll see here as far as the hornworts are concerned, right? So mutualistic nitrogen-fixing cyanobacteria. So they harbor these cyanobacteria, and so it increases the amount of nitrogen available to other plants, which is also, you know, when you have fertilizer and such, what do you think it contains? You think it contains quite a bit of nitrogen in order to enable for the nutrients that the plants need in order to survive and grow? Absolutely. Okay. Let's see. Now look at this here. This is pretty cool. When I saw this here, I thought that was pretty amazing. So the Arctic tundra, okay? Half of the biomass consists of these bryophytes. Again, hostile environment for most vegetation, but these vegetations, right, they don't require a whole lot of, in comparison to, I'm looking outside the window here now, and I see these bushes and these big trees and such, you know, much different requirements for structures like, for plants like that in comparison to these very simple types of plants. Let's see here, ancient seedless vascular plants here. So as far as over geologic time, buried remains were compressed and modified, forming deposits of coal, oil, natural gas. So again, talking about fossil fuels and such. And so there's some different theories regarding this, know that. So it's not just, sorry, there's a little fly or something. But you know, when you hear the term fossil fuels, this is what's going on as far as leaves, branches, old trees, and swampy carboniferous landscapes fell to the ground, became buried in anaerobic sediments, and as a result, over long periods of time, compressed, modified, forming coal, oil, natural gas. Again, these fossil fuels, what we're familiar with and what we rely upon. See here, so several species of bryophytes and seedless vascular plants have played important roles in broadening our understanding of plant biology and evolution as far as doing research and such. So they're very easy to study and to work with, right? So knowing that these certain plants, studying the evolutionary pathways of groups throughout the plant kingdom, ferns and other seedless vascular plants, long been involved in for research on plant growth and development. And so again, pretty easy to grow in the lab and to have readily available and such, and to do research with. Okay, folks, so let's